It was 2 o'clock a.m. on a Tuesday, the kind of hour when the world feels hollow and the city hums like a machine half asleep. I had just stumbled home from a 36-hour shift at the hospital, my scrubs stiff with sweat and antiseptic, my feet swollen enough to make my shoes feel like traps. All I wanted was silence, maybe a shower, maybe just to collapse. But the apartment wasn't empty. Someone was waiting in the dark. The faint orange glow of a streetlight cut through the blinds, sketching the outline of a man in the armchair, rigid, unmoving. My father, Dr. Michael Harrison, chief of surgery, patriarch of the Harrison medical dynasty. His hands were clasped, his face unreadable, but his eyes burned. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at my tablet. He lifted it, the glow of the screen illuminating the deep lines around his mouth. "I saw your laptop," he said. His voice was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your stomach drop. I knew that tone. It was the voice he used before a bad outcome in the OR. "You're throwing away a decade of work, a medical degree, for this." He waved the tablet like a weapon. On the screen spun a digital sculpture I'd spent a month creating, fractured light, code, and motion woven into something that felt alive. My escape. My rebellion. "This digital garbage," he hissed. "You are an embarrassment." I stood frozen, every nerve in my body screaming to defend myself, but I didn't. He rose from the chair, his shadow towering across the wall. For the first time, he looked straight at me. "Get out." That was all. Not "let's talk," not "explain yourself," just exile. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just turned, walked to my room, and packed one duffel bag. Inside went a few clothes, my tablet, and a sketchbook no one in my family had ever seen. As I zipped the bag, I realized this wasn't sudden. This had been building for years. Every comment, every cold look across that mahogany dinner table, every "Harrisons don't settle for second best." It had always been leading here. When I walked out of our Lincoln Park brownstone, I didn't look back. The night air hit me like a slap, cold, clean, and terrifyingly free. Behind me, the house stood like a museum exhibit, polished wood, surgical precision, and not a shred of warmth. That was the truth I'd never said out loud. It wasn't a home. It was a residency, a place where love was conditional and performance was mandatory. My father was the chief of surgery. My mother, Jennifer Harrison, chaired the hospital guild, always perfectly dressed, always whispering her favorite warning, "Sarah, what will people think?" My older brother, Christopher, was the family's pride, a surgical resident, a mirror image of my father in every way that mattered. And me? I was the crack in the marble, the daughter who saw systems and color instead of blood and anatomy. Growing up, dinner wasn't dinner, it was grand rounds. My father would quiz us between bites of steak. "Christopher," he'd say, "differential diagnosis for acute epigastric pain." My brother would light up. "Rule out myocardial infarction, but more likely pancreatitis, cholecystitis, or a perforated ulcer." "Excellent," my father would beam. Then his gaze would shift to me. "Sarah, your anatomy midterm?" 94, I'd say. He'd smile without warmth. 94 is not 100. The Harrisons are not second best. My mother would stir her wine and smile tightly, pretending we were a perfect family. At 15, I built a small welded sculpture, a bird with broken wings. I brought it home, proud and trembling. My father looked at it once, lips curling. "A waste of good metal," he said, and went back to his medical journal. I hid the sculpture in my closet and never showed him anything again. Years later, when I stood at my white coat ceremony, I smiled for the photos as my father's hand gripped my shoulder. Everyone saw pride. I felt restraint. The starched fabric around my neck wasn't a coat, it was a straitjacket. That night when he told me to leave, it wasn't a betrayal, it was a diagnosis. Our family wasn't sick. It was engineered that way. We weren't children. We were assets, groomed to yield prestige. Love wasn't love, it was a performance bonus for upholding the family brand. As I dragged my duffel bag down the quiet Chicago street, my breath fogging in the November air, I understood something for the first time. My father's rage wasn't about me failing myself. It was about me failing him. To him, I wasn't a daughter. I was an investment, and I had just defaulted. At 25, I became the family's ghost, disowned, disinherited, and finally free. The first thing I did was stop at a dumpster behind an all-night diner. I peeled off my gray medical scrubs, the ones that still smelled like antiseptic and despair, and dropped them in. The white fabric vanished beneath a pile of coffee grounds. For the first time in years, I breathed. And for the first time ever, I was alive. The first morning after I was disowned, I woke up to the sound of my upstairs neighbor's pipes groaning. The air smelled like burnt toast and bleach. My new apartment, a studio smaller than my old walk-in closet, had paper-thin walls, peeling paint, and a single window that looked out onto a brick wall. But it was mine. For the first time in my life, the silence didn't belong to someone else. I had $10,000 in savings, a duffel bag of clothes, and a stubborn pulse of determination. The world didn't care that I used to be Dr. Harrison's daughter. To my landlord, I was just another tenant who paid late. To the customers at the cafe down the street, I was just another barista with tired eyes and a polite smile. I got the job the day after I moved in. The cafe owner didn't even look at my resume when I handed it over. He just said, "You can steam milk? You're hired." That was my new world. Burnt espresso, the hiss of milk frothing, and a line of people scrolling their phones, never looking up. Every night, when the last table was wiped down and the lights were dimmed, I went home to my studio, sat cross-legged on the cold floor, and opened my tablet. My art, my real pulse, was waiting. I started creating again. Not the neat medical diagrams I used to draw for anatomy class, but the chaotic, broken forms that lived inside me. I sculpted in pixels and light, building structures that twisted and bled into each other. Digital organisms born from pain. Every line was an exhale I'd been holding for years. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat much. I lived off caffeine and adrenaline, and I didn't care. In that flickering blue glow, I felt more alive than I ever had in the fluorescent light of the operating room. Weeks blurred together. Rent was always due. My bank account was shrinking. I sold a few small pieces to online buyers for a couple $100s, enough to keep the lights on. But I was invisible. Just another voice shouting into the void of the internet. Then one night, everything changed. It was 3 a.m. I had just posted a digital sculpture called "The Wound That Grows Wings." It was made of thousands of tiny mirrored fragments forming the shape of a bird mid-fall. I hit upload, expecting nothing. But 10 minutes later, a notification popped up. At Daniel K. "This isn't just code, this is a soul." His message stopped me cold. Nobody had ever said something like that before. I clicked his profile. Daniel Kim, 27, Seoul-based digital artist, founder of an obscure online collective called Echo Frame. His feed was filled with strange, luminous art, structures of sound and geometry that pulsed like living things. I replied. One message turned into 10. 10 turned into hours. By dawn, it felt like I'd known him my whole life. Daniel was the first person who really saw me, not as a failed doctor or a disappointment, but as an artist. We talked about everything: art, isolation, our families, the weight of expectation. He told me his parents had wanted him to become an engineer. He'd disappointed them too. "You and I," he wrote, "we're the same species, creatures that don't fit their cages." That line stayed with me. A month later, Daniel told me about a new international grant for emerging digital artists, $750,000 for innovation in virtual sculpture. "You have to apply," he said. This isn't just art, it's the future. I laughed. They're not going to give that kind of money to a broke ex-med student with a second-hand tablet. But he didn't laugh. Sarah, they'd be lucky to have you. I applied that night. I submitted my entire portfolio, 12 digital sculptures that looked like grief made visible, and hit send. Then I forgot about it. 6 weeks later, I got the email. Subject line, "Congratulations, Sarah Harrison." I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. I read it 3 times before it hit me. I'd won $750,000. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped my coffee. I called Daniel. He didn't even let me finish the sentence before he screamed through the phone. "We did it," he shouted. "You did it, Sarah!" We didn't waste a penny. Daniel flew from Seoul to Chicago. We spent the next 6 months building something we'd always dreamed of, a digital platform where artists could upload, display, and sell immersive 3D art in virtual galleries. It wasn't just a website, it was a world. We called it Lumen, because it turned art into light. When we launched it, we expected a few hundred visitors. By Monday morning, the servers had crashed, over 1 million users. Suddenly, everyone was talking about digital art like it was the next renaissance. I was no longer the black sheep. I was a spark. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing my father's approval. I was building something he'd never understand, something alive. The first time I walked into the empty Adobe estate in Santa Fe, it felt surreal. The house wasn't just big, it was alive. Built from sun-baked red earth, it stretched across the desert like it had grown there naturally. Inside, the ceiling soared 20 feet, and a massive wall of glass framed the canyon below. The quiet was deafening. I could hear my own heartbeat in the empty halls. It was mine. $22 million. Cash. No strings, no approvals, no legacy to uphold. And yet, standing there, I felt nothing. Not triumph, not joy, just a gnawing emptiness. The same ghostly ache I had felt when my father dismissed my art. This was the hidden curse of sudden success. The world says, "You have everything now." But inside, you're still the same scared, lonely girl who threw her scrubs in a dumpster behind a diner. Daniel arrived the next day. His presence was comforting, grounding. Together we began transforming the vast warehouse-like studio into Lumen's headquarters. Banks of monitors lined the walls, light rigs hung from the ceiling, and interactive sculptures hovered mid-air. Every surface vibrated with energy, as though the house itself recognized the work it was about to witness. The platform exploded. Galleries from Tokyo to Berlin, artists I had never met, uploaded their digital masterpieces. Interactive experiences that once existed only in imagination now had life. The art world, which had long ignored digital work, couldn't look away. And then came the offer. A massive international art fund based in Zurich contacted us. They didn't just want the platform. They wanted me. My portfolio, my collection, my mind. 6 months of tense negotiations followed, each more surreal than the last. Contracts were faxed, lawyers argued over minute clauses, and I signed papers that seemed heavier than any scalpel my father had ever held. Finally, the offer arrived. $25 million. I stared at the screen, paralyzed. The number floated there like a star, too bright, too distant. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call Daniel. I didn't even celebrate. Instead, I bought a one-way ticket out of Chicago. I left the gray, clinical city behind, a place haunted by every disappointed glance, every whispered judgment, every memory of second best. Santa Fe was a revelation. The desert air smelled of sage and sun, of freedom. I found a property online, a sprawling minimalist estate overlooking a silent canyon. The centerpiece wasn't a grand ballroom or marble staircase. It was a studio with a wall of glass that captured the horizon. The land felt alive, receptive, human. The day the sale closed, I walked through the empty house. My footsteps echoed across stone floors. The silence was thick, tangible. For the first time, I realized that success didn't feel like victory. It felt like a stage set for someone else's story. I thought of my father, Dr. Michael Harrison, who held human hearts in his hands, but never understood how to hold his own daughters. I thought of my mother, Jennifer, who ran her life as a perpetual performance, and Christopher, my golden brother, perfect and oblivious. Here I was, with $25 million, a palace in the desert, and yet I felt like an imposter. But imposter syndrome couldn't last long. The acquisition was final, and work poured in. Artists needed guidance, the platform needed upgrades, the technology demanded constant attention. I became not just an artist, but a leader, the head of a small but fiercely talented team working to redefine the digital art world. One morning, amidst the chaos of servers, emails, and video calls, I nearly missed it. An email from Art Forum, the Bible of contemporary art. They wanted to feature me. 3 weeks later, the magazine arrived. The cover photo showed my studio, the desert glowing in the background. The headline read, "The $25 million Ghost, How Sarah Harrison, an Unknown, Became the New Face of Digital Art." They detailed my sudden departure from the Harrison medical dynasty, my isolation in Chicago, and my explosive rise in the art world. They showcased my estate, my studio, my sculptures, all of it bathed in sunlight and possibility. I read it detachedly, a strange calm washing over me. I didn't feel pride nor joy. I felt clarity. For the first time, I wasn't running to please anyone. I wasn't trying to be Harrison enough or doctor enough. I was just Sarah. And yet, the past has a way of reaching forward. 2 days later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, Chicago area code. I hesitated, then answered. "Hey sis, long time no see," said a familiar voice. Slick, smooth, trained for donor meetings and cocktail parties. Christopher. My stomach tightened. He wanted something, always did. He continued casually. "Saw that Art Forum article. Impressive. That house? Wow. Amazing. We were thinking we should all come visit, reconnect. Reconnect." The word hovered in the desert air, hollow and glittering. I didn't feel hurt. I didn't feel angry. I felt something sharper, recognition. They hadn't come to see me. They had come to audit me. And this time, I was ready. Saturday morning, the black rental SUV pulled up to my Adobe estate. The desert sun glinted off its polished surface, making the vehicle look even more out of place amid the red cliffs and sagebrush. My heart was steady. For once, I didn't feel nervous or excited. I felt ready. Out stepped my family, Chicago incarnate in human form. My father, Michael, in a pressed blazer. My mother, Jennifer, pearls glinting, silk shell top immaculate. And Christopher, loafers and crisp slacks, the golden child polished to perfection. They looked like they had just been dropped into my world, a world they had never understood. I met them at the door. My mother attempted a hug. Stiff, awkward. I stepped back. "Sarah, you're home," she said, her voice brittle with forced cheer. "It's vast. It's different from Lincoln Park," I replied, flat. They were stunned. I could see it. The 20-foot ceilings, the glass walls, the sprawling warmth of the house. It was everything their brownstone was not. Heavy, cold, designed to impress rather than live. My home was alive. It breathed. I gave them a tour, polite, detached. I felt like a real estate agent showing off someone else's estate. "This is the studio," I said, opening the doors to a vast room where my unfinished digital sculptures hovered on banks of monitors. Christopher stepped forward, reaching out to touch a swirling mass of light. "This is what you do?" "This is what I do," I said, watching him hesitate, unsure if he was impressed or just confused. "Impressive," my father muttered, his voice tight, not looking at the art. He was calculating the square footage, the value, the ROI. Lunch was catered, a southwestern feast, colors bright, aroma sharp, but the tension was palpable. My mother made small talk, praising the salsa, pretending to be interested. Christopher ate silently, hands folded, pale. My father swirled water in his glass like he was performing for an invisible audience. Finally, after the plates were cleared, the moment came. My father's eyes, trained to read human bodies, avoided me completely. He looked at the distant mountains, swallowed hard, then spoke. "Sarah." His voice faltered. Not at me, but into the canyon. "We didn't just come to see the house." I knew the twist already, the truth they had been hiding under polished smiles. He glanced at Christopher. "His practice, it's struggling. Significant loans. Risks." Christopher stared at his hands, a golden child reduced to a trembling boy under pressure. My mother jumped in, voice bright, rehearsed. "Sarah, we thought, given your success, you could help. An investment, to keep the Harrison name strong." The words hung in the warm desert air. An investment. The golden family currency, money and control disguised as love. I felt no shock, no rage, only clarity. "You didn't come here to reconnect," I said, calm. Each word cut through the air like a scalpel. "You came here with a bill," my mother sputtered, indignant. "Sarah, that's not fair. No," I said, flat, certain, unmovable. "This isn't a reunion, it's an audit. I will not be investing in Christopher's practice. I will not keep the Harrison name strong. I'm done with that name." My father's head snapped up, a mixture of disbelief and fury on his face. He was a surgeon who could handle a human heart, but had no idea how to hold one. Christopher flinched. My mother twisted her pearls nervously, searching for a lie that would restore control. I walked to the edge of the patio, the canyon stretching endlessly behind me. The sunlight painted the desert gold, warm and unyielding. For 25 years, I tied myself in knots, trying to be the second best Harrison. You threw me out, and I became free. I met people who see the world for what it is. My mentor, Mary Thompson, taught me something you never could. You live an extractive life. Everything you touch is a transaction. You use medicine not to heal, but for status. You see Christopher not as your son, but as a legacy asset. I walk in a world of creation, not extraction. Silence fell. The wind stirred the sagebrush. The sunlight poured through the glass walls. My father's face turned white. Christopher shrank under my gaze. My mother's voice faltered, bright but hollow. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I just stood, tall, calm, untouchable. I realized in that moment that their love had never been real. It had been conditional, transactional, performative, and I was finally free of it. I stood on the patio, the canyon stretching endlessly behind me, the desert sun warming my shoulders. My family waited inside, the Harrison dynasty, polished, poised, and utterly exposed. They had come to extract, to leverage, to convert my success into a lifeline for Christopher's failing practice. They hadn't come to see me. They had come to cash a check. For the first time, I felt neither fear nor anger. I felt clarity. "You didn't come here for me," I said, voice quiet but sharp enough to cut through the tension. "You came here with a bill." My mother's pearls jingled as she reached toward me, desperate to restore her illusion of control. "Sarah, that's not fair. No," I said, stepping closer to the edge of the patio where the wind stirred the red desert dust. "We are not here for family. We are here for an investment. I will not be part of it. I will not keep the Harrison name strong. I am done." My father's jaw tightened. His hands, the same hands that had held human hearts in the operating room, trembled slightly. Christopher shrank, the golden child reduced to a frightened boy. My mother's tight smile faltered. I paused. I let the silence sit, heavy in the warm desert light. Every second emphasized the truth. They weren't here for love. They were here for measured gain. Their world was transactional, calculative, extractive. I thought back to Mary Thompson, my mentor. Her words echoed. They live an extractive life. Everything is a transaction. You, Sarah, live a generative one. You create. You inspire. You give life. Yes, I said aloud, my voice steady now. You live to extract. I live to create. I walk in a world that gives, not takes. I walked them through the studio, pointing to my works, the floating sculptures, interactive installations, my digital worlds. This, I said, gesturing to a massive swirling sculpture, builds community. It inspires. It creates new value in the world, not like the sterile air you breathe in the operating room or the invisible pressures you hide behind at galas. My father's face paled. Christopher averted his eyes. My mother clutched her pearls like a lifeline. They were trapped, exposed, the veneer of prestige cracking under the desert sun. I let the words linger. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I didn't justify. I simply observed them for what they truly were, a family bound not by love, but by expectation, obligation, and calculation. Then I walked to the edge of the patio, letting the canyon sweep past me. The wind whipped around my face, sharp and clean. I felt no guilt, no shame, no longing, only liberation. You will not extract from me, I said. I will not fund your failures. I will not live your legacy. I am not your asset, your investment, or your shadow. I am my own life, my own creation, my own world. My mother opened her mouth, likely to argue, to plead, to try one last manipulation, but I didn't wait. I turned toward the glass wall and walked inside, leaving them standing there, small, silent, their empire of control reduced to nothing more than their empty eyes. I closed the door behind me. For the first time in my life, the silence belonged entirely to me. The desert, the canyon, the studio, the swirling light of my sculptures, it was all mine. And for the first time, I felt whole. I had been the black sheep, the disappointment, the investment gone wrong. Now, I was free. Not by revenge, not by money, not by proving them wrong, but by finally seeing the truth. Their love had never been real. Their approval had never been earned. Their judgment had never mattered. And I had built a life of my own, generative, luminous, and unstoppable. The wind swept through the patio, and I felt it in my chest, in my hands, in my very bones. This was my world now. I wasn't the failure of the Harrison family. I was the first one to heal.